I'm Dr. Chris Rapoff of EC QME Continuing Education, and welcome to this week's presentation. As I begin today's presentation, I would first like to ask you a question. As a QME, have you noticed an increase in the number of psychiatric workers' compensation claims filed over the past several years? I certainly have, and I've seen much of an uptick in these filings in conjunction with the physical injuries that are filed as well. So that brings me to today's topic. Just what impact does this increasing popularity of the psychiatric claims filings on the workers' compensation system in California? So this will be the first installment of a two-part series as we explore and compare the workers' compensation physical injury versus workers' compensation psychiatric injuries in California. Today I'll discuss the differences between these two types of injury filings, and next time I'll provide a detailed comparison between the two filing processes and the different legal requirements of both of those filings. And they are two very different types of workplace injury claims. So let's get started. First, these are the following sources I reference when producing this presentation. Feel free to copy and paste these links into your browser if you'd like to read more about the increasing frequency of filings of these psychiatric injuries in California's workers' compensation system. Okay, some statistic and trends here. According to the California's Workers' Compensation Institute, the CWCI, there has been a noticeable increase in the number of psychiatric workers' compensation claims over the past decade. And the psychiatric component claims in addition. And this is the percentage of claims involving a psychiatric component has grown. This is reflecting the heightened awareness and reporting. As I mentioned earlier, these are accompanying the physical injury claims as well. Also, these are involving higher costs, which we will get into more deeply in just a minute, but psychiatric claims often result in higher costs due to longer claim duration, increased medical expenses, and the greater likelihood of litigation. Now, also, there are changing workforce dynamics. The Generation Z and the Millennials, if you recall. Generation Z are those born between 1997 and 2012, and the Millennials born between 1981 and 1996. They're finding that younger workers are more open about their mental health issues, and they're more likely to report psychological injuries. And also diversion and inclusion. Emphasis on inclusive workplace encourages employees to speak up about their mental health concerns. So as we see, things are beginning to change. Now, comparing the statistics of the psychiatric, or also known as mental health workers' compensation claims, to physical injury claims in California over the past few years revealed some very important trends affecting both employees and employers. So first of all, we'll discuss the physical claims of injury in California. The prevalence, well, physical injury claims have historically made up the majority of the workers' compensation claims in California. The common injuries, or the most common injuries, involve strains and sprains. These are often due to overexertion, lifting, or repetitive motions, also known as CT injuries. Average cost of these sprains and strains is about $10,000 to $20,000. Now, a serious injury would be something similar to a broken bone, surgeries, in injuries requiring significant medical intervention. That average cost can range from $50,000 to $100,000 in a case. And of course, we have the catastrophic injuries. These would be something on the realm of spinal cord injuries, amputations, traumatic brain injuries, with an average cost of $1 million or more over the lifetime of the claim. And that's really due to the extensive medical care and long-term rehabilitation that's involved. Now, statistics are basically, these are stable numbers. Over the past several years, physical injury claims have remained relatively stable in number. And as a percentage of total claims, the physical injuries typically account for between 90 to 95% of all workers' compensation claims in California. Now let's compare these to the psychiatric claims in California. The growth trend currently is there has been a noticeable increase in the psychiatric workers' compensation claims in recent years. Common conditions that are affected by this would be stress, anxiety, and depression. And the average cost of these claims runs between $40,000 and $80,000. There also are complex cases such as PTSD or long-term mental issues. These can exceed $100,000 very easily. Now, involving statistics, there is an increase of claims and they have been gradually increasing over time. Percentage of the total claims, though, historically has ranged between 5 and 10% of total claims. But the recent estimates suggest that they may now constitute between 10 and 15% of claims, though the exact percentages vary year by year and by the data source. Also affected was the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. There were heightened stress levels everywhere, and the pandemic introduced new stressors such as health fears, economic uncertainty, and adjusting to remote work. Also, a rise in mental health claims. Some reports indicate an uptick in mental health related workers' compensation claims beginning in 2020, the exact time of the pandemic. So, causes, well, the workplace stressors, high job demands, harassment, bullying, or exposure to traumatic events. And some legislative changes have also affected this. Laws like Senate Bill 542 have made it easier for certain workers, for instance, first responders, to file mental health claims by establishing a presumption that PTSD is a work related injury. Now, doing a comparative analysis here, claim numbers we just mentioned, but physical injuries remain the dominant claim by volume by a long shot. We know that. However, psychiatric claims represent a smaller but a growing proportion of total claims, as I mentioned. Now, the cost per claim, the physical injury claims vary widely and based on the injury severity from minor to catastrophic. And the average costs range from $20,000 to $40,000 for a standard claim. Versus psychiatric claims, they tend to be more expensive on average. Average costs can exceed $40,000 to $50,000 due to the longer treatment durations and the extended periods of disability. Also, the California Workers' Compensation Institute studies have shown that the psychiatric claims can cost between 40 and 50% more than physical injury claims in the long run. Let's discuss claim duration. Generally, physical injuries have a more predictable recovery timeline. They also may result in shorter periods of temporary disability, which totally makes sense. Now, the psychiatric injuries, in comparison, often have a longer recovery period and can result in longer durations of temporary and even permanent disability. So, what are the implications for this rise in psychiatric claims and workers' compensation? Well, the financial impact. First of all, the rising number of psychiatric claims increases overall costs for insurers and employers. And also, longer claim durations and higher medical and indemnity costs or payouts contribute to financial strain on the system. Administrative challenges exist as well. Complexity of the claims, for instance. Psychiatric claims are often require detailed investigations and medical evaluations to establish the work related causation. Also, legal disputes. There are higher potential for litigation due to the challenges in proving the predominant cause of the mental health condition. And finally, employer responsibilities. There's an increased emphasis on mental health support within the workplace and implementation of programs to reduce the workplace stressors and promote employee well being. Now, there are some considerations and limitations with these psychiatric claims. Number one is data availability. Exact up to date statistics may not be publicly available for the most recent years, as studies are always in the process and ongoing processes. And also, variations exist depending on the data source. Who is providing the data? The insurance company, government, or in industry studies? Those could be skewed either way. Also, evolving trends. Ongoing societal shifts in attitudes toward mental health may continue to influence the number of psychiatric claims and, in effect, increasing them. And the long term effects of COVID-19 pandemic on the workers' compensation claims, even as late as 2024, are still unfolding. So, in summary, physical injury claims continue to comprise the majority of the workers' compensation claims in California, but their numbers have remained relatively stable. Psychiatric claims are on the rise, both in the number and as a proportion of total claims. Factors influencing this increase are, as I had mentioned, a greater awareness and a reduced stigma around mental health, legislative changes facilitating these claims for the certain occupations, and workplace stressors and external factors like pandemic. Also, the financial and the operational impact is important because the increase in these psychiatric claims poses many challenges for the workers' compensation system in terms of cost and claims management. In conclusion, today we discovered that anxiety and stress related claims, also known as psychiatric, psych, or mental health claims, do have a substantial financial impact on the workers' compensation system, which affects both the costs of claims and many of the administrative processes involved. And we're also reminded that addressing mental health in the workplace is crucial for reducing these impacts and supporting the well being of the workers. I ask that you join me next time in the final installment of this two-part series as we discuss the significant differences between filing a physical injury versus a psychiatric injury workers' compensation claim in the state. We'll also discuss the legal requirements involved for these filings, which are very different from each other. I think this will be an eye opening discussion that you'll not want to miss. But until then, doctors, I'm Dr. Chris Rapoff, and I wanted to thank you again for taking the time to join me in this presentation. And until next time, thank you.